Hey there YouTube, 118 Set Shadow here. Here comes another card review for a card from set 10 and an Eradicator unit. This time we're going to be looking at Eradicator Gauntlet Buster Dragon, aka Shining Finger. I'm sure most of you guys get the reference already, but yeah. So, before I actually go into a review, let me show you a quick clip of this card in use.
Gauntlet Buster Dragon にパワープラス1万、そしてビビットブレイク。お前のリアガードがドロップされた時、パワー3000とクリティカルがプラス。まだ
この上スペシャルカウンターブラスト。
リアガードを1体選択、退却させろ。
もう一度。
パワーアップにクリティカル、おまけにリアガード退却。そのグレード差を俺にもくれよ。
カードの力だけじゃない、結構やるじゃん。
行くぜ、ガントレットバスタードラゴン、ダイナマイトカウンター。ぶちかませ
ー。オルックス、専用部、イエロージェム、1000でガード。
ツインドライブチェック、ファーストチェック。ガントレットにパワー、ボーイングにクリティカルプラス1。セカンドチェック。
よし、防いだ。
まだまだ行くぜ、ボーイングソードドラゴン、リンチューでブースト。
ノーガード。
Alright, now that we've seen that incredible power, at least I think it's incredible, let's continue on with the actual card. It has two primary effects, a limit break and an act ability. Let's start with the act ability. You special counterblast 2 Eradicators, and then your opponent selects one of their rear guards and retires it. Pretty simple effect, and maybe you're thinking, wait, your opponent gets to choose it, why not me? Well, think about it this way. There's Death Scythe, which allows you to choose the retire but only on call for the same cost. So, the fact that you can use this card this ability anytime you want kind of makes it a bit too overpowered to be selecting the card yourself. And the fact that it can be any unit at all. Whereas there are units where you can only get rid of the front row because that's how Narukami usually operates. But let's move on to the limit break now, which is where the card really shines. Every single time an opponent loses a rear guard due to a card effect, when it's put into the drop zone, this card gets plus 3000 and plus 1 critical until the end of the turn. So, if we look back at the clip, you saw that Naoki break rode this card. And by the end of that break ride, this card ended up with 4 critical. 4. Because Vowing Sword retired 1 front row, you special counterblasted twice, so Kai lost 3 cards, and this card limit broke each time a card was retired. So it gained 3 more critical plus 9000 power, putting it at a baseline of 20,000 with 4 crit. And then of course with the break ride, it was at 30,000. Pretty scary, huh? If you don't have a perfect guard to guard this card, especially when it was break ridden, good luck. Even Kai had a hard time guarding this one. And Naoki almost pushed through that guard too. But anyway, enough of that. Let's go through this card a bit more in detail. Overall, it gets the crit pressure type ability, and it has the potential to one-hit KO your opponent. Just because of the fact that it can get 4 critical by itself with Vowing Sword's Break Ride. And if you're going to get really daring, when we get another Break Ride card called Electric Shaver Dragon, which retires the back row unit of any front row unit that retires, you can, every single time one of those units retires, this card activates. So, when the front row retires and the back row retires, this card gets 2 crit and 6,000 power. Pretty nice, huh? Don't try to use the special counterblast with it though. Your opponent gets to pick. Because if they pick the back row, the front row doesn't retire along with it for that effect. But there will be another Break Ride coming called Ignition Dragon. That card makes your opponent select 2 of their rear guards and retire them. So if you Break Ride this on top of Ignition Dragon, you essentially perform this card as a special counterblast twice at the cost of 1 counterblast and the Break Ride. So it automatically gets 6,000 power and 2 critical, putting it all the way to 17 with 3 crit. That's already a pretty high number for a single counterblast. And then you'll still have the special counterblasting ability. So if you use the special counterblast on top of Ignition Dragon, that's 4 units gone, 4 crit gained, putting this card at a whopping 5 critical. The crit pressure is amazing with this, just because of the fact that it can just keep gaining those criticals. So if you do it all at once, make sure your opponent doesn't have a perfect guard, you can wipe them out in one go. Because as you gain the crits, you also gain power, making it harder and harder to block. So the main thing is that it is susceptible to perfect guards, which means you have to think about how you use it. Do you want to pool in all the crits at one time and try to crush your opponent in one go? Or do you want to allocate the crits? Do you want to retire 1 unit every turn, put this card at critical 2, potentially have your opponent guard it every single turn? Or if they can't guard it or can't even afford to guard it, they'll take extra damage, putting them near defeat. And in that case, you could actually ride this card over with something like Eradicator Descendant, which is better as a late gamer, because it'll force 2 attacks, and the second attack also forces an extra damage. And when I say that, I mean its extra critical ability. But you do have, as said, you do have to consider this card. It is perfect guard susceptible, and its second ability lets your opponent decide what to retire. So if they had a starter Vanguard which they kept on the field the whole time because they were never going to use it, it could end up being rather worthless and only fuels the limit break itself. But it could be just as valuable, because even though your opponent has to select the card, if their rear guard is full of valuable cards, they'll still have a hard time deciding which one to retire. And if you really want to be the one to select the unit, you can always just call Death Scythe, because Death Scythe will still trigger the limit break. As long as a card goes to the drop zone via an effect, this card's limit break will go off. Which is why it synergizes perfectly with cards like Death Scythe, Cho-Oh, Linshu, all those cards. This card has really good synergy with Narukami's mechanic. It can fuel its own limit break. It's a really good card. A really good card to consider, and in the future, it will get more powerful. And that will conclude my review of this card, which I will add is my favorite Eradicator to date. I just love the artwork. I love that shining finger concept. I love it. Thank you guys. Enjoy.